Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The headline lets you know exactly what kind of racist hit piece this is going to be. Calling the white UCLA team America's sweethearts, and calling the black national championship LSU team basketball's villains. Not much for subtlety, these white supremacists in the white media. I mean, you'd think his audience for this is white suburbanites of a particular racial bent, perhaps. It was blatantly racist and over the top, and it was meant to be. The first line of the attack was, "This isn't just a basketball game, it's a reckoning." Reckoning? For what? Well, we all know what for. It's for black athletes daring to beat white ones. I didn't know UCLA and LSU had some sort of rivalry. Spoiler, they don't. And what's this reckoning crap? A reckoning is what happens when someone has done wrong and it's time for them to pay for it. Who did LSU's women's basketball team wrong? Apparently white middle-aged racist sports writers like Ben Bolch. Picking sides goes well beyond school allegiance, he wrote. Picking sides? What about people who just watch sports because they like to see an athletic competition? This guy's going, no, you gotta pick a side. And this is not somebody who's being satirical or over the top. This is somebody who's deadly serious. You gotta pick a side. This goes beyond school allegiance. By the way, I want you to keep that line, beyond school allegiance, in mind because Stephen Smith said that this racist diatribe was basically simply about school allegiance. How does this go beyond school allegiance, though? By saying that, he's dropping the racial dog whistles. White people, even if you don't care about sports, you better care about this, because this is about more than a game. It's about white primacy. This is the old great white hope all over again. Won't some white team please beat these black brutes? Someone put them in their place. He then goes on to call the LSU women's team dirty debutantes. In case the phrase isn't explicit enough for you, here's what you get when you Google dirty debutantes. And when talking about black people, you want to make sure that you always say that they're dirty somehow. That way, like Joe Biden, you can come along later and say, Barack Obama, he's clean. Yeah, not like the rest of these Negroes, right? The whole thing about America's sweetheart, that was a laugh. That's blatantly racially coded language. If you're black, you're from the wrong side of the tracks. They always make sure these white sports writers mention poverty or hardship or drugs, or they say, well, you came from a rough side of town, a rough background. They'll also try to find out you have some sort of learning disability, or they'll claim some other kind of personal trouble. But if you're white, then you're just a clean-cut kid. America's sweethearts. Oh, you're just such a go-getter. Well, in America, I was told that it's all about winning, and UCLA doesn't win. Damn sure not like LSU women's team does. That was certainly the case with the game that they had. LSU spanked America's sweethearts and then sent them to bed without dinner. Sure, the LA Times got to make a few meaningless insults, but LSU did what really mattered. They won. Continuing his racial rhetoric, he called the mostly white UCLA team milk and cookies. I guess he figured calling them peaches and cream would have been a little bit too on the nose. Say, does anyone remember what color milk is? I'm sure, though, that has nothing to do with his comparison. On a side note, milk is cold and bland, while hot sauce has flavor. I think there's something to be learned there. I, for one, found it ridiculous that this racist actually had the gall to imply that LSU's women's basketball team isn't growing women's sports. LSU's women's basketball team was the biggest story in women's sports in 2023. That team single-handedly put women's college hoops on the map. Nobody knows or cares about UCLA outside of a few white reporters in Southern California. The only reason anyone even cared about this hit piece is because he was attacking the women's national champions, which are the black ladies of LSU. As many of you know, I'm not a sports fan. I don't care about sports one bit. But even I heard about the impact LSU's women's basketball team had. The Lady Tigers, they made a big impact on the sport, giving women in sports a huge spotlight. UCLA has never done that, and neither has this Bulch creep. He later went on to write, "This is about good versus evil, right versus wrong." Really? Good versus evil? Is he talking about basketball or the war on terror? And evil? What's he talking about evil for? He's describing a girls' college basketball team, not the Church of Satan. I mean, how sick and vile this creep is. This guy is doing this garbage not because this is just basic sports reporting or the usual asinine hyperbole that some sports reporters like to engage in. This guy, for him, this is personal. This means something to him beyond basketball, and we all know what it actually means. The thinly veiled racist rhetoric makes it clear because he wanted it to be clear. These are college kids he's talking about, and what exactly have they done that's so evil? Did they kick a baby? Did they burn down a house? Are they robbing grocery stores? What the world are they doing that's so evil? He says one of them taunted a white player. Apparently that was the evil act. That Angel Reese actually returned a taunt that the white player from Iowa had given to LSU. You recall that Caitlin girl, she did the whole "you can't see me" hand gesture, and Angel Reese at the end of the game was reminding her that she was about to lose the championship. Iowa's white players were arrogant and disrespectful, and LSU rightly threw it in their faces. That's not evil, that's sportsmanship. Now, had the motley crew from Iowa merely shown some class, they could have saved themselves some embarrassment. But that's the whole thing that this Bolch and people like Keith Olbermann didn't like. When they look at those white players, what they see are their sisters, their mothers, girlfriends, etc. But when they look at the black players, well, they don't see that. What do they see? They see evil. Why? Because what they see is the threat of competition, the very thing that white supremacy was created to prevent. It was created to ensure that the Ben Bolches of this world would never actually have to compete for their daily bread. And for 500 years, there's been a racial system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees handed over to those with the right skin color. Meanwhile, you got black folks like the Angel Reeses of this world who have to work for what they get, and the Ben Bolches just can't take it. Having to compete against people who he knows work a hell of a lot harder than he ever has, that's what he considers to be wrong. Seeing that the people who work the hardest actually reap the rewards, imagine that. That's what he considers to be evil. He sees these other teams as being avatars for himself, and when they lose, he's reminded, so did he. And because UCLA is not that well known as the national championship LSU team, Bulch makes sure to include a picture of UCLA's team just in case some of the dwindling readership for the LA Times didn't know that that team's overwhelmingly white. He didn't just drop racial code words, he also made sure to include racially loaded imagery too. And for the record, the only person dividing people is Ben Bolch. When you look at the big TV ratings that LSU's women's basketball team brought in, when you look at their stadium attendance, they're the ones bringing people together. The only thing that they're hell-bent on doing is winning, which in the real world is the only thing that matters. Angel Reese led her team to a national championship. What has this Ben Bolch character led the LA Times to, other than a high-profile embarrassment? And people will remember Angel and her team and their accomplishments long after Ben Bolch returns to the obscurity and irrelevance from which he temporarily slithered. And by the way, it's not as if the LA Times has some huge track record of attacking LSU, any other sports teams. They don't. But this guy decided he wanted to do this just ahead of the game between LSU and UCLA, and he doesn't have a track record of engaging in this kind of rhetoric. This was apparently different from him. Apparently, LSU's women's basketball team made this guy feel uniquely insecure. And I think we all know why. Of course, LSU beat the brakes off of UCLA, and he knew that this would be the outcome. That's the reason why he wanted to get this in here before that happened. For the racists in the white media, openly attacking black people, that's their consolation prize for all of these L's they keep taking. And don't let anyone tell you that this is about the players showboating, because if these girls were white, all we'd be hearing about is them being flamboyant or intense or passionate or demanding of themselves and their teammates. That's how the white media would be framing it. Kim Mulkey, when she was playing college hoops back in the 80s, she was over the top with all of that aggressive behavior she was doing, but she's white, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman, so no harm, no foul, right? However, if you're black, they label you as controversial or arrogant or divisive. They don't use those kind of words when talking about white athletes. As with the law, white supremacy has a double lexicon for how it talks about black people and then how it talks about white ones. This Bolch creep, he wasn't trying to hide any of his racism. Now, he thought that it might fly under the radar because newspapers are dying, and most of the blatant racism that they publish goes completely unnoticed. Only this time, someone did notice. A firestorm ensued, and Bolch eventually was forced to put out a non-apology apology days later, in which he claimed that he just wasn't artful enough with the words that he used. He doesn't admit that he did anything wrong. He doesn't even acknowledge his clearly racist remarks. Instead, he shrugs it off with empty platitudes about he didn't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. Oh, and UCLA champions diversity. First of all, UCLA were not the ones who made these racist remarks. He did. So him trying to talk about UCLA and diversity, I guess he figures that LSU's team isn't diverse. This apology was just a pile of word salad attempting to masquerade as contrition, when in reality, it was just more insults. He's not some teenager writing for his high school or college paper, or some undeserving white privilege hire at the local sports rag. He's a middle-aged, bordering on elderly man writing for one of the most well-known papers in the U.S. Or am I supposed to believe that a self-proclaimed veteran sports writer simply had no idea that all this stuff that he was writing was racist as hell, and that apparently he was allowed to go straight from his computer right to the typesetters without anyone at the LA Times reading his garbage take before it was published? Gee, there's suddenly no approval process for what gets published in the LA Times now? Because if you wanted to write something disparaging about UCLA, you can bet they wouldn't allow it. And it wasn't lost on anyone that this guy put out this alleged apology on April 1st. Again, this creep trying to be clever. Everybody knows that sports are a favorite haven for these white supremacists to go to. People like Rush Limbaugh actually began their careers not in media, but in sports, and that's no coincidence. Especially not where the white media is concerned. Everybody knows that the sports page is the dumping ground for every anti-black racist, every bigot, every two-bit prejudiced punk who grinds their rotten crooked teeth because the most popular sports are dominated by black people. The sports that actually make money, that people actually care about, are dominated by black people. Newspapers have a number of departments, society, politics, etc. But when you think about the times when a newspaper has had a scandal over something that one of their reporters have wrote, have you ever noticed that a disproportionate number of these incidents are caused by their sports reporters? Even in towns and cities which don't have a strong sports culture, the newspapers still have a sports page anyway, and they regularly feature attacks on black people just like this. The Times has of course lied through their teeth about it, saying that they edited this racist hit piece removing some of the language, and why? Because they said it does not meet the Times editorial standards. Well, obviously that's a lie, because if it didn't meet the Times editorial standards, then how did it get published? This clown didn't just get up one morning, type up this garbage, and then take it straight to the typesetters. He first had to submit this hit piece to the editors-in-chief, have people who actually looked it over, spell check it, make sure that it has the kind of slant that the editors at the LA Times like, and then they go ahead and hand it off to be printed. This hit piece had to go through at least 3 different individuals before it saw print, and each one of those individuals read what he wrote, they saw the clear and undeniable racist overtones of it, and they all approved of it. So Bulch isn't the only one involved in this. What he wrote was a joint statement issued from the LA Times, and this helps to illuminate why so much of the material from the LA Times has an anti-black slant. The sports page is the real editorial page for the white media. This is where the owners of these newspapers or these TV stations get to say what they really think about the black community and then claim, oh, we're not talking about the black community in general. We're just talking about this one player over here or this one women's basketball team over there. Yeah, of course they are. No, they attack the black community by proxy. That's what these attacks are meant for. No matter how many child rape incidents happen in majority white sports like, say, hockey, you never see the white media going in and painting with a broad brush. In fact, they don't even cover that stuff at all. They bury it. Even one of the white players on the LSU team admitted she is fully aware of how she doesn't get the vitriol and hate that her black teammates do. So it's all out in the open. And while the LA Times hasn't been defending this garbage, at least not directly, they also haven't punished anyone for it either. There have been individuals, though, who have actually been defending this garbage, and that brings us to ESPN. While Shannon Sharpe's commentary on this issue wasn't all that sharp at all, Stephen Smith predictably couldn't wait to put on the tap dance shoes and start bootlicking.
What happens is that as damaging and as bad as this was, it would have been significantly worse if it came from a neutral publication or a national publication. If the USA Today or somebody like that did it, it would resonate even further. Here's the reason why. The Los Angeles Times, you know who they're rooting for.
Yeah,
the home paper.
Of course.
So you root for the home paper. You see what I'm saying? And so if you get an opportunity to paint somebody as the villain while you're pristine and you're like the dove flying in the sky and, nothing blemishes you, you can understand what their intent was, but they went too damn far and they made that mistake. And not absolving the Los Angeles Times in any way. I'm just saying all of us would receive it even more fiercely had it come from a neutral publication.
Yeah.
Gee, to hear Stephen Smith tell it, the LA Times is innocent in all this. Why, this Bolch character, we gotta see things from his point of view, don't we? Everybody's just overreacting. So this is supposed to be what counts as a black man in the white media, right? This is a guy who tries to, if you even insinuate that, hey, Stephen Smith, you sure do seem to stick up a whole lot for all of this anti-black nonsense, he'll put on all of this phony indignation. How you calling me out? We're calling you what you are, Stephen Smith. That's what we're doing. So yeah, you got Stephen Smith wanting to be the first one to show his white editors and white paymasters over at Disney, see, I'm sticking up for this. I'm not just letting people beat this guy like a piñata. I'm gonna go ahead and stick up for him. Cause it's important that my bosses, I know they do the same kind of racist stuff like this, and I wanna let them know I ain't offended. I'll defend you, massa, no matter what. That's what he's doing. Now, should this creep Bulch be fired? Sure, but of course under white supremacy, these anti-black racists, they merely get moved around. And if he gets canned, you can count the minutes until he turns up again at Fox Sports or some other sewer of pretend journalism. Speaking of Fox Sports, thanks to Brother Tariq for pointing out this one. You had that Tether, Emmanuel Acho, what's his name, actually joining in attacking the LSU women's basketball team.
I'm about to give a gender-neutral, racially indifferent take. Now, if you want to say, well, Acho, cater your take based upon gender, Acho, cater your take based upon race, I will understand that. But I'm about to give a gender-neutral, racially indifferent take. Angel Reese, you can't beat a big bad wolf, but then kind of cry like Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, his remarks are neutral, all right. Gender neutral, race neutral, and also IQ neutral. You hear that pile of garbage he just laid there? This clown's using the same empty, dismissive language as these white racist reporters, so you see what well he's drawing from. He knows that he's going to join in on dumping on these girls, but first he decides that he's going to lay the groundwork by bestowing some sort of phony objectivity onto himself. I'm just being neutral here. No, he's not. He's being biased as hell. And the reason it's so transparently phony and fake is because this guy is using the same pathetic rhetorical tactics he picked up from the white racists and the white media. This grinning, slap-happy clown models himself after those kind of types, and this is the result. And did you see how he compared Angel Reese to a dog? Listen to it again.
Angel Reese, you can't beat a big bad wolf, but then kind of cry like Courage the Cowardly Dog.
The damn nerve of this scumbag. This is the reason we have to separate ourselves from these tethers. Even this Bolch creep didn't have the nerve to come right out and say, well, those black girls are dogs, even though he did tiptoe right up to the line. But this Tether, he feels like he has a special dispensation to say this mess, and like Stephen Smith, he knows who the real audience for his remarks are. Whatever racist white media executives he hopes are going to get him out of the Fox Sports Chitlin circuit he's in, and he hopes into a real gig that actually pays something. The Jason Whitlocks, Stephen Smiths, and Emmanuel Achos, they're all auditioning constantly. When Massa puts you on that treadmill, you gotta run till you drop because you have nowhere else to go. And this is how low you gotta stoop. And the fact that those other 3 Negroes on that panel didn't check that bastard, those 2 males, I dare not call them men, they should have slapped the jollof right out of his mouth. And that woman's just sitting there, so you got all these Negroes, males and female alike, they're just sitting here while he says this crap. Now you know why it is that Fox Sports wanted this Acho character to basically be the lead on this show, because they knew he would say stuff like this. That's what he's there for. And of course, you also have the usual online racist apologists trying to give the bigot cover, but they didn't have much to work with, and even they knew it. One summed up their little dismissive remarks perfectly, saying, I didn't see the piece you wrote that caused the need for this, but your apology is heartfelt and genuine. We all need to strive to be better, more empathetic people. Thank you. Now, this guy didn't even bother to read what this Bolch character wrote. He couldn't be bothered to see what all the furor is about. He doesn't even seem to know who this Bolch character is. He's just some interloper who stumbled into this thread because it was trending, and he doesn't even know what's going on. He just sees this white guy posted a clearly insincere non-apology apology, and he's confident that this is adequate. And he says your apology is heartfelt and genuine. Was Bolch writing this so-called apology to this clown? How the world can he say it's heartfelt or genuine at all? He wasn't the wronged party here. But even though he doesn't know what this guy is apologizing for, that doesn't stop him from talking because white privilege. He literally has no idea what he's talking about, but that's not going to stop him from slamming his gums. White-splaining at its finest. None of them even tries to defend this guy. They just say, well, he apologized and we need to move on and leave it at that. So we're seeing people circling the wagons to splain all of this away. But the reason that I felt it necessary for me to throw in my 2 cents on this one is Kim Mulkey, she's not exactly somebody who sits well with me. Yeah, she's defending her team, but the truth of the matter is, and you know what I'm talking about, you can pretty much tell that she wasn't accidentally leaving out that this was racist. She stuck with the only sexist part of it because she's from Louisiana. She's a good old gal, and you know what goes along with that. So as far as she was concerned, even she was giving a defense of this guy by not coming up straight the middle and saying, you know what, this was racial and we know it. Instead, she's sticking to it's just gender, being sexist here. Yeah, she knows that as far as she's concerned, being a woman is not the most important thing for her. The reason she's got her job is because she's white. So she sees herself as being white first, and she's got to defend that one. As far as being a woman goes, well, she can go ahead and tiptoe across that line occasionally, long as she doesn't do it too often. And that's why I felt prompted and motivated that somebody needs to say something real about this and sum this stuff up. Understand the sports page is where all the racists and the bigots for these white media outlets like to hang out. That's where they get to let their hair down and say what they really think. They get to say what management really thinks. And that's what this Bulch character was doing. If the LA Times wanted to, for the first time in their existence, show something resembling some journalistic integrity, what they would have done is they would have changed the title of that hit piece to LSU is America's Sweetheart versus its basketball villain. But if nothing else, Bolch was correct about one thing in spite of himself. This wasn't just a basketball game. It was indeed a reckoning. His. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Eric Bailey, Frederick Richburg, David Green, Minnie FBA, and Tomorrow Boyd. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.